And so we live in a society where we don't understand what the game we're playing in, and we're losing. We don't understand the game because we haven't been taught the game. We don't even understand something simple like racism. I keep telling black folk what racism is. I go around the world and I ask blacks in various countries. I say, two people stand up any place in the room. I'll give you $1,000 if you can tell me what racism is. I've never ever had one that knew what racism was. Never had one. I said, what is racism? He said, well, it's bigotry. It's hatred. It's not getting along with people. It's bias. It's discrimination. All that wrong, 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 wrong. Racism has nothing to do with getting along with people and liking people. Racism is a competitive relationship between groups of people who are competing for the ownership and control of resources, wealth, and power. That's what racism is. Racism never existed on the earth until the 1500s, when all of a sudden 9 European nations decided to use black labor, black bodies, and black wealth out of Africa to get in a race. After Columbus had discovered America, supposedly, in quotes, in 1495, all of a sudden they're going to rush to redevelop the Western world. So all these countries were in a race, a contest, competing to see who can develop North America, Central America, and Latin America. It was a race. It was a race, and everybody was in the race but black folk. Black folk never participated in the race. You were the prize, the boot, the loot that they used to empower themselves. See, they were buying blacks in Africa on a typical for $15 to $20 a piece. And they established a thing called a profit margin, 15% return on investment, 1,500% return. So they were selling for $400 and $500. They got into the United States and to other countries. And that's why the whole banking system started off of slavery in Portugal. Again, and the whole system of capitalism started off of black slavery. Before that was mercantilism. The whole concept that you all are playing in with promotions and what's called marketing development came out of black slavery. And it was designed not for you to profit, but for others to profit. Everybody was profiting initially except you, and it has not changed. And so when I look at your program, and it says that you're marketing developers. Marketing developers. I would say marketing means going into any environment, a site, a geographical area, and promoting a product or a service or a good to get an equal value for it. You're marketing. But it also stipulates in there that to be a marketer, you must have a market. So I ask black folk, where are your markets? Where are your markets? Where is the black market? And they said, well, Dr. Ellis, we got a black market. Where is it? They said, well, it's all over the United States. And that's how much you get. Well, we got a $650 billion black market. And that's a lot of money. Wrong, it's not. It is not a lot of money. It's only a lot of money when it's aggregated. Scattered through the integration process, your money is nothing. It is chump change. Because we don't plan to have power. That's why we continue to integrate and scatter our money. And then brag about how much money we got. And then we come up with magazines and research to tell everybody where to go get our money and how to get it. Nobody else is that foolish but us. You got to have a license to be that stupid to do those kind of games. You don't tell people how to come into your market and how to sell to your people and take your money and your economy out. That's called a capital drain. When I was assistant secretary in commerce, I took trade missions around the world. Nobody would allow that to happen in their country. We would not let the Japanese come over here and do dumpings, dump their automobiles in Norfolk and in Jacksonville, Florida. That's called dumping, which means you come over and take the wealth out of our nation and doesn't take anything back to Japan. When they come over and dump their steel from Korea, we had a balance of trade policy, so you can't do this. Everybody has a balance of trade policy except black folk. We'll let anybody come in and do anything to us because we haven't changed since slavery. We still don't understand the process. Every day, Burger Kings and McDonald's trucks will come into a black neighborhood and dump hamburgers, Coca-Cola, and take nothing out. That's a balance of trade deficit. This country right now is suffering from a balance of trade because we've allowed it to happen since Bush has been in office. And that's why you cannot profit in the society, because you got a capital drain. Nobody's ever taught black folk how to practice group economics. Your money is supposed to stay in your own country or in your own community and with your own hands and your own people and bounce at least 8 to 12 times. But we are the only people that absolutely refuse to do it. We won't do it. As a matter of fact, we are against spending money with our own people. And we're in that condition because Meritorious manumission taught us in 1710. But a policy was set up in the Virginia colony and then also later into South Carolina. It's called Meritorious manumission. Meritorious means to earn, manumission means to release. So a black could earn his release from slavery if he did one of four things, or a combination, elaboration, or sophistication of those four things. One, if he could prove to whites that he could see things through the eyes of a white person. And he'd prove it by one, saving a white person's life. Two, saving a white person's property. Three, inventing something or improving the profits that he get from picking cotton and corn or tobacco. Or four, if he would squeal on and tell on any other black person who was trying to escape from slavery. That was called Meritorious manumission. We still got blacks in America that's working hard and diligently to get meritorious manumission. They're working hard to make sure that they protect a white person's property. I don't care, and they protect it by any time you come out with an affirmative action program. I have the dubious honor of being the person that wrote that first affirmative action plan for the state of Florida in 1971. That went all over the country, a comprehensive plan. I didn't write the plan for minorities, poor folk, Asians, Hispanics, Arabs, midgets, humpbacks, lesbians. I wrote it for black folk. But immediately the whole frame of reference is the way you keep black folk down is always dilute and water something and make pretend it's for everybody. And that way anything for everybody is for nobody. And so they took that minority program, the affirmative action program, made it a minority program. And said, now I want the affirmative action program to die for that reason. In 1999, I go down to Texas, and the program was written for black folk. I look at the amount of money in state contracts in Texas that year, and white women got 78%. And nobody in our black leadership, in our black overclass, and the black civil rights movement ever said, "Hold a second, how are you going to put white women into a minority, into an affirmative action program set up for black folk when she was right along with the white man?" She co-owned, co-controlled, co-influenced, co-herited, and everything that the white slave owner had, she had it too. She sat in the same house, under the same table, slept in the same bed and raised his kids. How is she entitled to be competitive with black men or black people in the society? But our black leadership didn't say anything. So white women went into the affirmative action program and took it over and dominated. That's why you go to check Coca-Cola about 3 years ago, Coca-Cola company, almost 66% of all the money on the minority program went to white women. And in Texas, white women got 78%, and Hispanics got 21%, and blacks got 0.9%. Because again, we don't know how to play the game. We keep buying into these myths about people, about these very broad, ambiguous groupings. And all of that stuff started immediately after the Civil War. See, the Civil War, what they never tell you, and when I'm coming to a point on this with immigration, that in 1865, the first civil rights law was written strictly and solely for black folk to reverse the Dred Scott decision, which says black people don't have any rights that anybody's bound to respect. So they wrote the civil rights law of 1865 strictly and solely for black people. And Andrew Johnson vetoed it, and they came right back, a few liberal whites, and they wrote the 1866 civil rights law. Again, said it's strictly for black folk. And the civil rights law had nothing in the world to do what you talk about today about civil rights. That civil rights law was written for three things, and Congressman Benjamin Hatch and Charles Sumner and Thaddeus Stevens, and what they said is this, that there's only two things that the black person could ever be in America. You're either going to be slaves or you're going to be free. But you will always be a slave in America unless the black person receives minimally 40 acres, a mule, and $100. And you never got it. Because so that tells you where you are now. Nothing has changed for you. And so in 1868, they passed the 14th Amendment. It says, well, at least if you're not going to give black folks something, you need to protect black folks' rights. And the law then said it is mandated upon all levels of government to use all necessary means to lift the badges and incidents of slavery off the shoulders of black folk. Nobody has done it. That is a law. And at that time, the civil rights law said if you don't do it and you're in government, you go straight to jail, white or black. Nobody has carried out those civil rights laws to the present time that were written for black folk. The 14th Amendment says that black folk must be treated in a manner similar to the way whites are treated under equal circumstances, similar circumstances. And in 1873, some whites from New Orleans went to file a lawsuit to use the 14th Amendment in the slaughterhouse case about the meat packers down in New Orleans. And in 1873, the United States Supreme Court came back and says whites cannot use those civil rights laws and cannot use the 14th Amendment because it was written strictly and solely to protect the rights and the freedoms of black people, people of African descent in America. When they said that in 1873, immediately the whole country exploded. And then the executive branch, the government, the judiciary with the courts, and the Congress got together and says, we got to end this right now. Because if black folk get smart and started using the civil rights laws and started using the 14th Amendment and started looking out strictly for themselves, they can be self-sufficient and competitive as a people. And they say what we got to do now is to broaden and to whiten those laws and pretend those laws were written for everybody. And if they're written for everybody, then black folk can't use them. See, that's how Barkey came up in 1968 and used the 14th Amendment in the medical school exams to say that there was a reverse discrimination against him. That's why you see all these reverse discrimination court suits all over the country, because black folk now have walked away from their rights. You see, anytime you want to be a minority, a poor person, or people of color, or diversity, multicultural, you walked away from your rights. You're not entitled to any benefits. You cannot justify having an affirmative action program, having a Black History Month, having reparations for black folk if you're using those very broad terms. Because the minute you say you're a people of color, or you're a minority, or you're diverse, what you're saying, there's no difference in the treatment of a black person in this country than an Eskimo or a Filipino just came in last week. And if there's no difference, then how are you going to demand something special or exception? How are you going to demand having a special week for black history? How are you going to demand to have reparations and affirmative action? When you go into the marketplace as a developer or promoter, you are not entitled to anything because you keep using the terms that says you're not anything different from anyone else. If your company is talking about diversity and multicultural and the minorities, you cannot justify going into the black community and looking for black consumers or having black dollars specifically set aside for black folk. You just wiped out your whole history, all the history and the mistreatment and the slavery of your own people and ancestors by saying, I'm a minority. And if I'm a minority, I'm no different from anyone else. And so my people have never learned how to play the game. They keep going into the marketplace in very broad, ambiguous terms, the concept that was used after the Civil War. And that's why we now keep talking about minorities. And so now we got a major problem in society that's going to wipe us out, immigrants coming into society. Because in 1970, for the first time, after the Civil Rights Movement was over, and there were some benefits coming to the table for black folk, those other groups figured it out. They figured out what my people hadn't figured out. See, because up to 1970, all the Arabs in this country, all the Hispanics in this country, they had, and then Asians in this country, they had been living with, marrying, and going to school with whites. On their driver's license, their immigration papers, they were classified as whites. But after the Civil Rights Act in 1970 and all these benefits for affirmative action came to the table, they say all we got to do is to break away from the people we've been getting benefits from and go against black folk. And now all these immigrants are coming out. They started in the 1970 census. They're now competing against black folk for resources. And they're going to wipe you out. Your leadership will not support you. They're all supporting more immigrants coming into the country. They're down on the border saying, y'all come on, come on. And they don't understand. Let me give you a couple of points, and I'm going to give you some strategies we're going to have to start using. They don't understand that for every 10% increase in immigrants into this country, the people that are hurt are primarily black folk. White corporations benefit, black folks suffer. For every 10% increase in immigrants in this country, black people lose 0.3% of their income. I'm going to give it to you again. For every 10% increase in immigrants coming into this country, it's been going on throughout society for over 100 years, black folk lose 0.3% of their income. Now, since 1970 alone in this country, when I just told you, when all of a sudden these groups broke out, they figured they can go to the United States now and get all kind of benefits. All they got to do is put one foot on the shore of America, and they're now entitled, they're now equal to black folk. They're equal to 400 years of suffering by black folk by just putting one foot in the United States. They're now entitled to go into affirmative action programs, get Social Security benefits, and get a free education and everything else. So since 1970 until the present time, the immigrants in this country have gone up over 400%. Now, if you multiply 400 times 0.3, it comes out to be 12%. Now, what's the impact of that? You go back and look at your census. You find out in 1950 when the civil rights movement started, and it started over this issue that black folk were being underpaid. At that time in 1950, a typical white person in the United States was making $1. A black person was making 54 cents. That meant that a black person with a college education could not make as much as a white high school dropout. So a black person earned 54 cents to every dollar the white was earning. Now, because of the civil rights movement, black folk then got some new opportunities going into government jobs and some white corporations. So our income went up during the 60s from 54 cents up to 66 cents against a white dollar. By 1976, we went back from 66 cents back to 54 cents where we are now. Your entire civil rights gains in income was wiped out by immigrants coming into the country. Nobody's going to tell you that, but we're going to tell you through our think tank. Your whole income has been wiped out, and now the gap between the wealthy in this country is widening. The poverty rate is increasing, and most damagingly on blacks. So not only have you lost